Welcome, everybody. Today is webinar 2 of 3 in our Sales Espresso Series. And the Sales Espresso Series is a glimpse into our master program called the 10 Steps to Sales Success. And in that program, we cover mindset, behavior, skill set, and of course, run through the entire program with the golden thread of the GC index. And that helps you to become the ultimate sales warrior. So with that, I want to say welcome. And if today you're joining us for the first time, I'll introduce myself. I am Mark. I'm the Managing Director and co-founder of Kwelanga Training. And today with me, I've got a panel of specialists, Daniel, Shan, Louis, and then, of course, Steph, who's going to be looking after the chat section when we go through that. For those of you who weren't here last week, Louis is our sales specialist with over 20 years experience in training and coaching, working with sales reps right up to executive level and across Africa, the US and Europe, with many of the big global players that we know today. Louis brings some deep insight, and we'll be sharing with you later on why active listening is such an important superpower when it comes to becoming a sales legend. So that's Louis. And then also we have with us Shan. Shan is our master GC partner in South Africa. She brings with her expertise around the GC index, and we'll be sharing a little bit more about why the GC index has such an impact in sales and what it might bring to our listening skills and whether we have a listening bias with certain proclivities. And then, of course, we've got our DJ Dan, who's our chief integrator. Dan will be talking us through, at the end of this session, talking us through the training needs analysis tool. We did introduce everybody to it last week, but Daniel's got some deep insight there with regards to how that tool gets used effectively in sales and what a snapshot could look like and how we get to those snapshots. So with that, and before I kick off with today's agenda, I actually just want to do a short little recap of what we did last week. Now, last week, the focus was on how to buy from me and how we can use certain qualities and areas to differentiate ourselves. And one of those was the GC index. We looked a little bit about what the GC index is and how we can use the GC index to differentiate ourselves as salespeople. Shan, I'm going to hand over to you for a 60-second recap, if you don't mind, and then I'll pull up that slide.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. So just very quickly, the GC Index is a revolutionary new tool that measures our energy for making an impact. So it measures our natural inclinations. We call those proclivities. So you'll hear the word proclivity a lot. It's not a personality assessment. It talks about how you contribute to driving results. And the reason why it's so important in sales is it helps us understand which part of the sales process we might focus on versus potentially which parts of the sales process we might subconsciously ignore. And that could really be the difference between making a sale or not. So the question is, could you be unconsciously sabotaging your own sales purely by the way that you naturally are inclined to focus on certain things?
Louis, we also spoke about three qualities that salespeople could apply, they could take away from the session straight away last week. And what I would like in your in fact, before you go into that 60-second recap, is just to get the audience to share with us in the chat whether you had the opportunity to apply any of those qualities from last week. And if you did, yes, it was a success, or no, I'm still practicing, or haven't had the opportunity yet. I'd love to hear from the audience, but Louis, over to you. I'll find that slide and just pull it up, and then you can share with us just in 60 seconds what we covered last week.
Welcome to the Sales Revolution, and so glad you are here. So last week, just a quick touch of it, we looked at the three qualities, and the three qualities quite simply last week was curiosity, active listening, and consistency. And what curiosity was quite simply all about was, and at the bottom you'll see there, it says that one, what if, or tell me more, that uncovers the deal changing problem. So in other words, at the end of the day, How do you gather more information from the client, and how do you get that information to such a way that the client actually sees you as being curious, but you also they're basically divulging information from them? And all of that goes with active listening. So in other words, you have to listen well while they're giving you all the information, because that is gold, all right, that you are busy taking there. And as you are getting all of that information while actively listening, the word consistency is so key within all of this, because while you are consistently busy working with your client, what's quite simply happening is you are building trust. And that one line at the bottom there, guys, if you forget everything else, this is it. Trust is currency, right? You're building a trust currency over here, because when a client trusts you, they buy from you, all right? And they want to buy from you because, again, at the end of the day, research shows us that trust is the key to buying. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Louis. So there we have it, a little bit of a recap on the GC index and those 3 qualities that could help us differentiate ourselves. There was also one very good question. I think it came from Ian, and we weren't able to answer it last week, but I do want to address it this week. The question is one that we get asked quite a lot, and it was, should people focus on their strengths and pass their weaknesses on to their teammates who have those strengths to run with? Shan, I know this has got to do what came in the context of the GC index. Perhaps you can answer this question best for us.
Sure, thanks, Ian. Great question, and yeah, one we do get asked quite a lot. So first of all, I just want to clarify that the GC index is not measuring strengths, it's measuring proclivities, or those natural inclinations. But how do we build strengths is when we know our proclivities, we build skills to support our proclivities, and that's what gives us a strength or an impact. That said, if we focus on our, the question being focusing on our superpowers or our natural proclivities, what we want to do is, we know that in a role, there's certain things that we have to do. And the GC index, it's not about abdicating what we need to do. So saying, oh, well, that's not one of my proclivities, it's not something I'm going to focus on and somebody else needs to pick it up. That's not necessarily what it's saying. It's saying that we need to, when we understand what our natural inclinations are and where we would tend to focus on things, if we build skills to support that, so it becomes a strength, and focus on those things. But then if we don't have proclivity for that particular thing, it will potentially be things that drain us or we don't naturally do. So therefore, we need to build strategies or put things in place to mitigate for the fact that it's not my natural inclination. And that could mean that I need to do something because it is me that has to do that task. Or where can I collaborate with those people that are stronger and more inclined in those areas? So it's both of those, but really understanding that so I know where to focus and who to collaborate best with for the best results.
Awesome. Thank you, Shan. I think that's a detailed answer for me. The key takeaway there is that proclivity plus a skill equals a strength. Right. I want to get into the agenda this morning. The topic is active listening. I'm assuming there where everybody can see my screen. What will you gain in today's session? Number 1, it's not what was said, it's what was heard. And Louis will unpack that a little bit for us. Secondly, does your proclivity lead to a listening bias? Shan will lead into unpacking that with us. Tools to elevate your listening. We've got 3 tools that we believe you can take away from this session that will help you immediately and that you can apply to your sales process. Daniel will share with us the TNA and how we can get a skill snapshot, and then we're going to wrap up and close. So with that, I want to start with you, Louis. This question, it's not what was said, it's what was heard. Why is that so important in sales?
Such a great question, Mark. And let me unpack it with this image that we have got in front of you here. So you'll see it talks about the communication model. And what I want you to do is, I'm going to be speaking to all 3 of these images you see in front of you here. But let me first start out with this. Obviously, you've got a sender of a message and you've got a receiver. So your sender is your salesperson, for instance, and your receiver is your client. And what happens is you've got information going back and forth all the time between your salesperson and your client, your receiver. But while this information is going back and forth, there's this thing called noise. All right. And I just talk about these external noises. Okay. And the external noise is not the jackhammer hitting outside or the traffic going past. It's the external noise inside of our heads, because we both go into any meeting with this agenda of what we want to get out of it. So there's so much happening whilst we're having this conversation. All right. And all of that impacts within the conversation as well. You're listening and. But that's why I've got this next image on the right top hand side that says the impact of a message. Now, this is a crazy stat. Every time I do this exercise, people go, "Are you flipping kidding me?" When you look at the impact of any message going through, 7% of the impact of a message is your actual words, and tone is 38%, and body language is 55%. In other words, 93% of the impact of a message sits within your tone and body language. That's where it sits. So in other words, guys, who's ever heard this? It's not what you said, but it's how you said it. And then we go, what did I say? And let's just give you a simple example. Imagine I started this session today this way. I said, "Hello, everybody. I am so glad you are here. Welcome to a great session." Versus, "Hello, everybody. I am so glad you are here. Welcome to a great situation." I said exactly the same words, but I just used it in a different tone and body language. So that's why 93%, guys, of your message sits within that. So when all this noise is happening, when all of this conversation is happening, you have to be aware of how I'm sharing information. Now, in all of that, I've got this one word, and you're going to hear it quite a bit. It's the word acknowledgement. Now, acknowledgement does not always mean that I agree with what you're saying. I might be saying some stuff here, and you might sit here and go, I'm still chewing on that. All right. So that's why it's not necessarily agreeing with what you're saying, but it's simply showing respect to your points of view. So when I'm engaging with people, I'm listening to this information and I'm just busy digesting through all of the noise. What I'm busy doing is I'm busy putting some information together, acknowledging the client. So it would be something like, let's say a client says to you, "You know what, done this before, it was just a mess." And your acknowledgement could be, "Mr. Client, none of us want to invest money into a product or a service and have a bad return. Just doesn't work." And you're by acknowledging that, you win the client. So that's our communication model.
Exactly. Thanks, Louis. Sure, that's an eye-opener for me. That impact of a message, 55% body language. I need to pay better attention. It's probably why I'm in trouble so often with my wife. Now, Louis, we know in a sales situation, salespeople are obviously the ones that sit in front of the client and they're listening and they're gathering the information. But at some point, they've got to come back to the office and deliver that message to the team that's going to execute on the deal. So we know that listening is important, but we also know that we have to get that part of the message right. What have you seen in the sales situation when people come back to the office and they have to relay that message?
So Mark, here's the thing. All salespeople love admin and administrational people. and what happens is we get back to the office and we share this information because we're so excited for the sale, because we're already seeing the commission come in and then we share. So the external is the customer, the client. Internal is our internal processes. So we as salespeople are sitting smack bang in the middle of it like a hamburger. All right. And then what happens is we take this information that we have gotten from the clients and all this noise, and we go and share it internally. And the internal staff take this information and then they have to work with it. And they work with it as best the information that we have shared with them through how we listen from external, we share it with them, and then they put together whatever it is that needs to happen on the internal side. Now, when that goes well, it goes well. But when it goes pear-shaped, I don't need to use the word because I'm on an open forum here, but it goes proper pear-shaped if we don't share information properly.
Exactly. And I think in the previous slide, and you mentioned it before, we mentioned it last week, trust is the currency. Trust is the currency for sales. So when we get it wrong, there are consequences.
Yeah.
And consequences, Louis, look like this, don't they?
Mark, there we go. Failure to communicate leads to problems. And you highlighted something. You said failure to communicate effectively leads to problems. And the problems that it leads to, quite simply, is 4 areas. So when you're sharing information, I'm now speaking mostly from an internal, that you're sharing information internally to what you heard. What happens is that there could be a lack of coordination. All right, and all of that lack of coordination that takes place can lead to frustration. Now, I don't know about you, but, when you start getting frustrated, emotions start getting involved. And that's why I've got this one saying, handle the issue, not the person or personality. Now, I've had a salesperson say to me before, but Louis, what if the person is the issue? And I'll sit back and I'll go, yeah, I hear you. We're not all, we're not all perfect. Some of us are close, but not all perfect. But then it leads to frustrations on the internal side. And then what happens, and this is where the shareholders just it's ANA, because now we get to a waste of resources. And you get so angry, you can kiss a flippin' puff at an open mouth, because you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, what has just happened here? And it's because of the information that you've shared on an internal side. And all of these things happen for lack of coordination, frustration, waste of resources. And then the ultimate thing that happens, there's a lack of trust. And as soon as there's a lack of trust, all of a sudden I'm sharing info, and the person you're sharing the info with, their white noise is this just a story again, or is this really going to happen? And what happens is that white noise just becomes more and more and more and more, and that lack of trust is gone.
Thank you, Louis. That's a good introduction into the session, and we can see the consequences there and why it's so important that we focus on more on what's being heard than what's being said, so we can translate that into the right message. Stephanie, I think it's the right time for us now to run our first poll. Love to see where our audience is sitting when we get to the results. Louis, if you don't mind giving us a running commentary on how we are progressing. So all you'll see there is the question. It says, in your client conversations, what do you find most challenging? So in other words, choose one. What do you find most challenging? Is it talking too much, staying focused on what's being said, reading between the lines, avoiding distractions and multitasking, or gathering information? Choose one and give us a running commentary. How are we doing?
All right, let's see which horse is winning here. At this moment, we've got staying focused on what's being said. Reading between the lines has just gone head to head with it on 33%. Talking too much is way low, which is 8%. I cannot believe you guys are being honest here, but let's just leave it at that. That's just my proclivity coming forward. All right. It's changed again. Gathering info is right at the bottom at 5%. And talking too much is right at the bottom also at 5%. At this moment, reading between the lines, 41%. It's changing again. Man, this horse race is really, really, really heating up. And gathering information is the lowest at the moment, which is 3%. So at this moment, we got a head-to-head here, Mark, which is reading between the lines, 35%, and staying focused on what is being said at 32%. So it's a head-to-head. I hope everybody has filled this in, but it's head-to-head, Mark, between staying focused on what's being said and reading between the lines. Reading between the lines has just gone ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Louis. 41%. So what does that tell us about our audience? Reading between the lines. That skill set of active listening is the one that we've really got to pay attention to in terms of maybe tone or body language. So I think today we've got the right audience for the session that we're wanting to unpack. I know that there's also a thing called a listening bias. And when it comes to proclivity, Shan, this could be where we have our superpowers or potentially our derailers that take us off effectively listening so that we can propose the right solution. I want to pull up a slide here in a second as I hand over to you, Shan.
Thanks, Mark. That wasn't the response I was expecting, but thank you, everybody, for playing into my slide, because it's the perfect segue into what I'm going to be talking about. And yeah, absolutely, that reading between the lines. And I mean, the thought that immediately comes to my mind is, why are we struggling to read between the lines? And could it be something to do with our individual proclivities, that what, in the conversation we are listening for based on our proclivities is not necessarily what the sender is putting out there. So if we look at our proclivities and just very high level, if we think about our game changer, and last week you would have remembered that I mentioned that game changers at their best bring possibilities that transform the future. When we're listening as a game changer, we tend to be listening for opportunities that we can challenge the status quo. So that could be our superpower in terms of listening, but we may tend to ignore things around risk, around stability or incremental improvement in favor of the more radical change. As a strategist that is all about focus and clarity, identifying patterns and trends, they might tend to focus on listening for the why behind the client's need, understanding what they need and why that is important. But small talk, relationship building might not be something that is top of their mind. From an implementer perspective, they're all about action, getting things done. They would be listening for the concrete needs, for practical steps and deliverables that they can action. But they won't be looking at the intangible benefits, the sort of more subtle needs. Then our polisher is all about looking for perfection, progress, continuous improvement. So they are listening for opportunities to perfect, to refine, to improve. Speed and pragmatism is not always something that they would focus on. And then finally, our playmaker is all about collaboration. So they would be listening to hear about the team dynamics, collaboration opportunities, but things like long-term strategy that is detached from people wouldn't necessarily be something that they hear. So in that, we can see that when we are listening for certain things based on our proclivity, and when you're not aware of your proclivity, you might not even be aware that that's what you're doing. And we talk about in our 10 Steps to Sales Success program, but it's really important to understand, how do my proclivities align with my sales process? And as I say, could that be the thing that is the stumbling block in making the sale successful?
Thanks, Jan. Nice insights there. I think it's something that once we're aware of it, it's one of those areas that we can either lean into, or we can just be aware of that, hey, listen, this is something that maybe I don't pay as much attention to, and I need to. So when I prepare for my meeting, I actually know, hey, these are the areas I need to look out for, because we want to make an impact and we want to make sure that everything that's being said is being properly heard and recorded. There's an interesting stat, Louis, that you can talk to, I know, because you love this topic of trust, and we know that trust is absolutely everything when it comes to sales. But here it is again. I'm just pulling it up for the audience before we go to our next poll. Just quickly run us through those stats.
It's just so simple. 75% of business-to-business buyers say trust is the most important factor in a supplier choice. So if you don't have trust with your clients, the chances are you're only going to close 25%. But if you have trust, 75% of it is that they're going to be with you, right? And 85% of buyers return to sellers they trust. And I'm going to be talking about that just now, because again, we all want that return business. We all want to see that return business, but trust is the key. So whilst you are listening, you're not listening to just absorb information. You are listening to actually go and say, okay, how do I absorb this information? How do I turn it into a way that the client and myself get it, and then keep on building that trust? So that's why, regardless of proclivity, consistent listening builds credibility and reliability. So that's why the proclivity is so important, because if you understand how you listen based on your proclivity, it just makes the world so much easier for you to build that trust.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Louis. Appreciate that. Steph, are we ready with our next poll? Can you pull that up for us, please? Right. I'm just waiting for it to pull up here on the screen. You will see it. It'll appear in the center of your screen as a little box. So when you're in a sales conversation, what do you catch yourself doing most often? A, thinking about what to say next. B, jumping in with solutions too early. C, multitasking while listening. Or D, waiting for a pause so I can speak. Let's give us some running commentary there, please, Louis.
All right. So let's see, ladies and gentlemen, at this moment, these horses are, oh, no. Hang on. Multitasking has just taken the lead with 30%. 30% multitasking, waiting for a pause so I can speak. All right. Is that, waiting to pause so I can speak has just taken the lead at 32%.
I think we can close this this poll now, Stephanie. I'm going to switch it off here on my side. I know that there are a couple of people that also responded in the chat rather than in the poll. But what we really want to do is to give the audience tools to take away from the session today that they can actually go and apply that will help them elevate their listening. Now, the first tool that I want to share with you is called Echo and Expand. There we go. Echo and Expand, one of the tools that you might be familiar with when it comes to elevating your listening. That's something that you would repeat back to your client to make sure that you've understood and heard what they've said, and then possibly expand on some areas where you need further clarification. But Daniel, I'm going to pull you in here because I know you've used this in a slightly different scenario, but the principle is still the same. Share with us a little bit about your most recent experience.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Nice to be part of the presentation this time around. Yeah, I suppose anecdotal stories are the ones that have the most meaning around it, and I suppose our webinar next week will also talk about that. But to share an experience here, myself and a teammate had an opportunity to present quite a complex solution to a client who was an executive head for a large hospital. We had, in principle, put forward a solution that was aligned to the expectations, and we were invited to go and do a final presentation to the team that will make a decision on this, expecting 2 or 3 people in the room. When we walked in there, we found we were greeted by an entire board of 12 people, all eager to hear what we had to say. So we had to tap dance a little bit initially to make sure that we're in the right space. But I think crucially for me, the biggest takeaway for that meeting, and which also then led to us actually closing the deal, was we were able to assess the change quite quickly. I was able to ask for alignment by getting feedback from those present and what they wanted to cover in the presentation, because they'd already seen the costing, they'd already seen the solution, and I just wanted to make sure that I could adapt their needs to the presentation that I was working with. So by adapting to their needs and being able to align to the outcomes of their expectations, we were able to change the presentation to an extent, but also answer all of their questions there and then. And I think the key thing at the end of the day was, because all the decision makers were there, when we had to follow up later to get the confirmation for the deal, it was a lot easier because they had the opportunity to engage with us.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that, Daniel. And so important just to understand and make sure that we've got context within the team or within our audience before we go ahead and present. I know that this has happened before, certainly has happened to me, where I found myself halfway through a presentation and suddenly there's a team member puts their hands up and said, are we in the same meeting, or am I in the wrong meeting? Did you miss the brief? And that's just not clarifying what the purpose of the session is, listening for those responses and then adapting, because I think that's a key skill and one of the many skills that we unpack in the 10 steps to sales success. One of my favorite tools that I'm going to pull up next, Louis, I'm going to ask you to just expand on this one a little bit. It's called the Curiosity Ladder. Speak to us a little bit about how we can use that as an active listening tool.
Yeah, it's such a great tool, this, Mark, and because it literally builds you up to the light bulb moment, not for you, but for the client. All right, and the reason I say that is because it's almost building blocks to the aha moment for the client. Now you'll see that at the top it says what, why, and what if, and I do need to just quickly speak to those 3 elements. The what of a service or a product or a service is quite simply the characteristics of it. In other words, what we will know as the features of a product or service. That's the what. The why of a product or service is quite simply the benefits to the product. In other words, why am I buying this? Now, again, the what, the feature can be the same, but the benefits can change from client to client to client based on their needs, their wants, their expectations. All right. And then the what if is something that I call a speculative question. It's something that speculates for the client in their minds to go, what if I change this? So to truly explain this, and that's why we build on these three elements to get to that curiosity that they're going, aha, got it. And they have the aha moment. You know, many times we as salespeople have the aha moment before the client. So that's why we want to sell the product before the product's ready to be sold. And that's why I always say, don't sell. The client wants to buy. All right. You don't have to sell. When the client's buying, you don't have to sell. It's like when women go and buy shoes. All right. The salesperson doesn't need to sell it. They're ready to buy shoes. All right. I know I just lost half my audience there, didn't I? But anyway, let's do a little bit of a role play here, Mark. Let's do a little bit of a role play here. So, Mark, what are the main challenges in your business currently?
Louis, thanks for asking. I think if I have to isolate it, I would probably say that our sales team has been missing their revenue targets. And so we've been underperforming on the revenue side.
Okay, and why is this happening?
If I had to isolate it, I would say that it's because our closure rate has dropped. You know, previously we have a standard closure rate of around 35%. It's probably hovering at 28% at the moment, and that's causing that gap between our actuals and our targets and why we're missing them. Okay,
so what if we can put something together that takes you to the 35%? What will be the impact of that? Tell me about that quickly.
Well, firstly, it's going to take a lot of pressure off the team and I think off the business. But my first question to you is how are you going to do it?
Now, salespeople, he's buying, I'm not selling anymore. Because what happens now, we've just gotten into a conversation. And that's what we want. You see, many times we want to go straight to the product. But instead of going straight to the product, Mark is going, you're going to do what? How are you going to do that? I'm going, Mr. Mark, let's ask more questions. Let's uncover. Let's start building curiosity that you know what we can do. That is what the curiosity ladder is all about.
Fantastic, Louis. Great example. And then we've got one final tool that we're going to share with everyone. It's a great tool as well. It's called the listening log.
Oh.
Yes, I can hear you want to jump in here, Louis. Kick it off.
Let me ask this question first to all the salespeople out there. How many meetings do you have per day, per week, per month? Now, that's the first question, because I know there's so many meetings we have. In all of those meetings, internal and external, do you remember all the details? And I guarantee you no, because if you do, you are a super being. All right, we don't remember all the details. And this is why the listening log is so important. After a meeting, I always encourage people, go and take notes, go and make notes. All right. And as you make those notes, you are busy putting things together that's busy giving you information to use next time to build trust. So let me give you an example. So I had a client and we built rapport and all of that. And this client of mine told me that his daughter was having a birthday in 2 weeks' time, and her name's Rose. And he said she's having a birthday. They're so excited about this. They're doing this, that, and the other. And what happened was when I left the meeting, I immediately wrote down Rose and I wrote down her birthday and I actually put it into my calendar. Well, on the day of her birthday, I sent a WhatsApp to this client of mine and I said, hey, happy birthday with your daughter. Enjoy it. Have a blast. It's going to be a great day. And I sent that and I left and he just went, well, thank you, Louis. And that was it. The next meeting I had, he looked at me and he said to me, Louis, man, I was impressed. I said, with what? He said, you remembered my daughter's birthday, but not just her birthday, her name. And I want to tell you, thank you so much. It meant so much to me. And yeah, we had a blast. And obviously that relationship just was built more and more stronger and stronger, which basically led to more sales. All right.
Trust. We came back to it. I think there's nothing more that and a little bit of personal relationship, listening carefully, can do to build that trust. And ultimately, I suppose what I've learned there, Louis, is that you value birthdays. So make sure that when you're with Louis, he takes down your name and your birth date and sends you an awesome present. That's the one new insight that I've gained. All right. I'm actually quite keen to see from the audience, out of those 3 tools, which ones they feel most comfortable with trying in their own sales process. Steph, if you don't mind, just pulling up that poll and let's run it and see whether any of those tools resonate with you. And in the upcoming week, which one of those tools are you most likely to attempt in your next sales conversation so that you can elevate your listening skills? And away we go.
And let's see who's winning here. The horses are running. The horses are running, and we have got all 3. All 3 on 80%. All 3 is in the lead so far. And Echo and Expand has not even left the gate yet. He's still sitting eating grass and enjoying the view, Echo and Expand. But Curiosity Ladder is listening log. Oh my goodness, listening log has just actually went in reverse gear, having something to eat with Echo and Expand because he loves the grass out there. But all three is way up there. All three. I think all 3 has taken this by a country mile.
Thank you, Louis. Always entertaining. I think, Stephanie, we can probably safely close that poll. It was a hands-down winner. I'm quite pleased that we can derive or offer value to our audience here, and that they feel that all 3 of those tools are actually quite useful. And maybe that's where Echo and Expand will get used as part of the cluster of tools. So please let us know next week how it went, which of these you tried, whether you managed to get to all 3, or if you found that you had a particular one that got the best particular results. So Louis, thank you for the horse race. Thank you for the 3 tools. Also to remember, Stephanie will be sending out an email following this webinar, and in that email, you will find the summary of all of today's presentation, and including how you can apply those 3 tools almost straight away. With that, and before we close off, I want to hand over to Daniel to talk us through the training needs analysis. It's one of those great tools that we've designed specifically for sales, and Daniel will just share a little bit about how it works and what that particular snapshot would look like and how you can access it. Daniel, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, these webinars go so quickly. It felt like we started 5 minutes ago. Yeah, I suppose the key takeaway for me with regards to the TNA is that we're often not 100% sure of where our competency gaps sit, because we always gravitate towards specific courses that we feel will help us be better at what we do. So what we try to do with our needs analysis tool is to flip the script a bit. And rather than asking you what courses you want to do, we ask you what competency requirements you might have to improve your environment that you work in. So the TNA tool focuses on asking about 90 behavioral and competency-based questions, specifically related to the sales process. By answering these questions based on your own ability to perform in that specific scenario, the tool then collates and provides a clustered score on the various categories that we cover. And from that, we're able to then identify where some of your competency gaps might be. Shows you a nice graphic representation as Mark has it on screen at the moment. And what then happens in this instance is you are able to identify where the critical components are that you need to look at for improving your skills. Now, the interesting thing is with this program, with it being 10 steps to sales success, they're all actually integrated to each other. So sometimes if you fail to close a deal, it's not because you're unable to negotiate. It could potentially be, but maybe you didn't build enough trust in the beginning of the process. So it would be a good indication here for you to see where your low scores are, and then you can see where you can improve that to improve your sales success along the way.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. Just quickly, how would the audience, if they go and take the training needs analysis, how would they access this report? How do you receive it?
Yeah, so if you've completed the questions that are in the evaluation tool, obviously you have to work through all questions in the evaluation tool to get the results. But when that result pops up on screen, there's an option for you to click to download the file. And the email address that you use to register for the TNA will then receive that PDF document, which you can then share with your colleagues, or you can assess it yourself to see where your skills gaps are. Or you can reach out to us and we can talk to you about how you can improve it along the way.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. And please, I see we're coming right to the end of our presentation. We've still got 10 minutes left. So well done, team. We're sticking to timelines, which isn't always easy because we know we've got Motormouth Louis there, and he's not often the guy that stays within his parameters. So well done, Louis. That's our first high five from me. But if you've got any questions, if you've got any questions or you curious about anything, pop it into the chat. I'll be happy to answer any of those. Steph, just keep a lookout there. Also, any comments about how you found the webinar this morning, whether there's been any value or key takeaways for you from this particular session. Obviously, that helps us when we build these sessions, because we want at the end of the day to be able to give you some kind of value that when you leave the session, you can go straight into your sales process, you can start implementing, and you can start seeing some return on investment. Naturally, all the topics that we touch on here gets unpacked in the 10 steps to sales success. So if that's something you're interested in, go and have a look at that overview, go and have a look at how it gets delivered, and please ask us any questions if you have. So with that, Steph, while you are navigating through the chat, I'm going to pull up the final slide just to give us a wrap up and a summary of today's session.
I think the key for me is wherever you are in the sales process, being able to adapt to your environment. If you get a question answered and you have to pivot on that to get to the right response, that's the key one for me. If you are confident in your product, then you're able to think beyond the product sale. And that's where you want to ensure your success comes from, by listening and being able to adapt.
Thanks, Daniel. Listening, the key. Louis, you had something to add?
Just, at the end of the day, one of these, two of these, somebody said it last week, I loved it. Ask the questions and listen more, and listen beyond the white noise that's happening around you. Stay focused, and you'll close those deals better and quicker.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Louis. So in closing then, just a couple of the takeaways here. Listening is a measurable differentiator. Remember, high achievers, and we want to be in that space of high achieving salespeople, listen 57% more than they talk. I think that's a key stat. Every GC index proclivity has a listening bias. We saw that. Shan shared it with us. And obviously, if you get to take the GC index, you'll get to discover a little bit more about your own proclivities. Then the tools that we can apply immediately, Stephanie will share those in the post-webinar email. There'll also be instructions for the TNA. But to summarize them, it's echo and expand, curiosity ladder, and the listening log. I know that the majority of you said you want to apply all three. Next week, I would love to hear how that went. And then, of course, the training needs analysis for sales. Go and have go follow the link after the that's in the webinar email. Go and take that analysis and then have a look at your snapshot. It gets emailed to you anyway, but it'll give you a really good picture of where you're strong and where your gaps might be in that process. And then finally, next week, the final webinar in the Sales Espresso series. It's Tell the Story That Sells and Crafting Valuable Narratives. Now, the one thing I am going to ask you to do when you get that email from Stephanie, there's going to be a link to an amazing video, and it's all about the concept of unreasonable hospitality. Please do yourselves a favor before the session next week. Go have a look at that video. I think it's maybe 5 minutes long, and it explains the concept of unreasonable hospitality and where it comes from, because that concept is key in understanding how we're going to be positioning the session next week. I want to say thank you to everybody for taking time out to come and join us. Steph, were there any questions that we can address?
Yes, Mark, we've had some good questions come through. Etienne is asking, he's saying, salespeople have a capacity, let's call it 100 clients. This takes up your full day and some extra hours. What do you do when you reach your capacity?
Louis, I think that's an excellent question.
It's an awesome question. And I actually want to pass the ball here to Daniel, because the reason I want to do that is Daniel's great when it comes to integration and understanding of just how to integrate that. Because I was actually busy reading the question as you read it there, Steph. So Daniel, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I might not have a quick answer here because it's normally a training session of an hour or two and we cover that specifically. But I think two big things for me here. It's not about the volume of work, but the quality of work. So if you prepare for your calls effectively, whilst your target might be 100 calls, you might achieve your goals with 50 calls because they are more qualified. So do spend a bit more time on qualifying who and what you're going to say and who you're going to call. And the other thing for me that's quite important is to chunk your time to the most optimal time in your schedule to do the right activities. So don't call early in the morning when people are getting ready for their day. Find a spot an hour before lunchtime or an hour after lunchtime because people are more inclined to be available then. And I suppose at the end of the day, the critical thing is if you're managing capacity issues, make sure that you give yourself time to also unwind. So take a break every now and again to refocus, because you can't keep working if you're under stress constantly.
Now you can see why I'm throwing it to Daniel, and you can see the power of team, because Daniel is brilliant when it comes to this. The other thing I also want to just say is that, remember, we cover time management within our course as well. So there's so many aspects that we cover in that as well. But yeah, Daniel said it all. What's the value?
Thanks very much, Daniel. Thanks, Louis. And spoken like a true polisher there, Daniel. Attention to detail. He's got it all organized and mapped out, hasn't he? Any other questions that popped up there, Steph?
Yes. So from Ronald, she'd like to know in terms of the price and duration of the full 10 Steps to Sales Success program.
Right, I can answer that. The price at the moment is 17,500 Rand. It runs over a 3-month period. So we try and do it on Friday afternoons. There's 2 full-day sessions, but the rest are all half-day, sort of espresso type sessions. We very much do, we call it training in the flow of work. So whatever you're currently busy on, whether it's a targeted list, a qualifying list, a pitch, a negotiation, you bring those into your sales sessions, into these espresso sessions, and we work through them, because we want to make sure that what you're doing is as impactful in your operational space as possible. So we want to make the relevant, we want to make it as relevant as possible. The other thing is, I know that for this time up until I think the 19th of September, we are running a promotion. Look out in that email. There is an offer, a special offer available for everybody who attended the webinar. So you'll be able to have a look at that. If you're able to take advantage of it, because it runs through the entire process. It also includes management contact sessions, coaching sessions for your team leader, as well as the GC index assessment, which runs as the golden thread throughout that project. So I hope I've answered your question there, Renelle, in terms of duration. I think the one that we've got starting next, the public program, runs from the 17th of October up until the 5th of December. So make sure you get your registrations in earlier, because there's limited space. But if we have a company or an organization that's got 10 or more of their own team, we then obviously customize it for that program if required, or at least make it as relevant to that industry as possible, and then roll it out for that group.
Thanks, Mark. That's all for now. No more.
Is that it? Okay, great. Well, thanks, everybody. There, we've stuck to our time zone. Appreciate it. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Please go and try those 3 tools. I want to hear about the success, and make sure that you're registered for next week's session. It's bound to be a banger as we close off the sales webinar series. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.